Okay. And present. Okay, so thank you for joining. I apologize, my Microsoft Teams notifications keeps popping up. I can't get it to stop, so we'll just try to ignore that. Okay, so we're going to talk about creative ways to create groups today. So thank you for joining. Um, I'm pretty excited about this one because I've never thought about or put any thought into how I create groups within my classes. And so it was kind of within this course that I thought that maybe there is ways to create groups that would actually enhance student learning, or maybe there's ways to create groups that would actually discourage student learning. So I was pretty excited to dive into this and see if what I'm doing is helpful or maybe not helpful at all to my students. So normally when I do need to make groups or pairs, I just try to group them together um, with students that they haven't really worked with before. I also try to think about grouping them together based on maybe how they're performing in class. So for example, grouping maybe a strong student with maybe a less strong or a student that takes a little bit longer to learn. Um, but reflecting back on that, I'm not sure that maybe that's quite fair to either of the learners. So it was really interesting to go through it and learn a few things. So just a quick introduction to me. My name is Nicole. I live and work in Cranbrook, British Columbia. I am a certified dental assistant and I work at the College of the Rockies in the certified dental assisting program. I currently teach one course and I am hired on as auxiliary faculty and I do all of the lab and program assisting. So we'll just start with a land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that I have the privilege of working, learning, living, and playing on the traditional homelands of the Ktunaxa and Kinbasket people. It is a privilege for me to learn, share, and practice on this traditional territory, and I'm really grateful to have that opportunity. So just a bit of an agenda here. So we're going to talk about the importance of group work, how to select groups or different ways to select them, my own personal experiences, a group tracking method that I learned that I thought was pretty neat, and then we'll end it with any questions or any comments, or if there's anything that you would like to discuss of what's worked for you for grouping students together, or maybe what hasn't worked at all and was a complete flop, because those are always interesting to learn as well. So maybe just a show of hands. Personally, for yourself, do you enjoy being in a group working type of setting when
Really
you're
depends
learning?
on the group.
What's that? It depends
Really depends on the
totally.
group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Sometimes it feels like you might be pulling the weight of the group, where it'd be easier just to work alone, right?
100%. I agree. I go back and forth as well with my relationship on group work, both for myself and when I have the students do group work. Sometimes you get a lot of pushback from the students. And I can't really say that I blame them. I totally get it. What I learned a little bit too is that preparing them for group work goes a long way. And that's something that I hadn't really done much prior to this. Um, so yeah, for myself, I'm a type of person that really likes to kind of take over control of something. I like to have control over many aspects. But I put in a group setting, I don't really like to be the leader. So what happens for me in a lot of group work that I do, is that I end up just taking on that leadership role because I don't want to kind of give away that sense of control. But it gets exhausting, and then there's always a little bit of resentment I get, and it's not anyone else's fault. I do know that that's on me. So in my last group project, what I decided to do was try to step back and let someone else take the reins and kind of be a little bit more of the follower, but still give into what needed to be done for the project. So at our first meeting, we got together and I had gathered some research and was ready for it. And unfortunately, my peers did not. So it put me kind of back in that position of being frustrated and being the only one that was prepared. So as we started continuing on and working together, I learned that the way that I learn and having the research that I had was able to actually propel us forward. And it allowed them to show off their strengths, which were my weaknesses. And the ending of our project was really amazing. And it was one of my favorite projects that I've ever done. So it took me a second to step back and realize that different people work in different ways, and it takes everyone and different things to come together to make the project work out. So that was my own experience with that, and I've learned a lot from it. So the importance of group work. So as we kind of discussed, there can definitely be some downsides to group work if it's not implemented correctly. However, there are a lot of positive outcomes that can come from group work, such as the learners are able to demonstrate better knowledge retention than students taught in other instructional formats. Learners are able to take ownership of their learning, and by working together, they get to see different opinions or approaches to achieve that same outcome. So it really allows for diversity amongst a group of learners. Secondly, the learners are able to create a sense of shared purpose that can increase morale and motivation. Essentially, they're all in it to win it. And it's easier to achieve a goal when you have someone helping you to achieve that same goal. There's also the sense that you don't want to let your partner or your group down. So sometimes, and usually, it does help you to stay focused for yourself and for the group. And thirdly, it encourages active learning, the development of critical thinking skills, communication between peers, and developing decision-making skills, which I think are all really lacking. I'm terrible at making a decision as well. So I think that's a really great one, a really great benefit to group work. It engages students through collaborative activities and discussions rather than passive learning. And it exposes individuals to diverse perspectives and by encouraging problem solving and stimulating deeper understanding through discussion and debate. So, group work really relies on good communication, and the learners must be able to share ideas and build trust in order to achieve that common goal. So prior to selecting the groups, I do think it's really important in group work in general that when learners get together in a group who are very diverse, it's important that within these groups, a psychologically safe environment is fostered. So this ensures that all members feel safe to share their ideas and their opinions, and they understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. So, first of all, when you're thinking about selecting effective groups, you have to think about the appropriate size of the group. It really depends on what the project is, but groups shouldn't be any larger than 5 people. The larger the group, the more likely it is to have decreased participation. Some learners will end up being passive observers rather than actively actually participating in it because there's so many voices. So by keeping the groups small, it ensures that all learners have a specific role and it encourages individual participation. Smaller groups also help to maintain cohesion within the group, and it fosters a connection among members when there's not as many there. You may also want to think about having an odd number of learners in a group, as this can often help with deadlock decisions. So you can use the majority rules if there's an issue or any kind of decision making that they're kind of stuck with. So having odd numbers. Second, I have skill level. So facilitators may choose to group students based on their skill level. This can depend on the project and if there are going to be long-term groups or short-term groups. Facilitators might decide to group learners with diverse abilities and characteristics so that they can learn from each other. Or you may want to choose to create groups based on similar abilities or skill level so that they're all on the same pace. So either one works. It just really depends on what the project is and what you're trying to gain out of that project. One of the interesting ways to create groups that I found while doing my research was to group high achievers together, or learners that often take on that leadership role so that together they can actually figure out a way to share that workload and that not that one person is doing it. So that might even it out a little bit too, and it also might help them learn a little bit more about themselves. And then on the reverse side, grouping learners together who may be maybe lower achievers, ones that really like to do the bare minimum or like to stay back and be quiet. That way, that group doesn't have that natural leader, and it kind of forces others to kind of come out of their shell and take on that role, hoping that, at least one or if all of them will end up rising to the top in order to get that project done. Next, we have diversity. So diverse students or individuals, putting them together really helps with different backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives. This leads to benefits such as improved creativity, better decision making, and enhanced problem solving. Student chosen. This was a really interesting one to me. If you'd asked me back in college to create my own group for any given project, I would, of course, choose to be in a group with all of my friends. Now, being with all of my friends may still create quite a diverse group with differing opinions and skills, but it still may lack the push and the enhanced benefits that you get from working with someone that you haven't worked with before. So I found two different ways that students can choose their own groups. The first one is to have the learners choose their group based on a mutual interest in a topic. So, based on a shared interest in a topic, question, or project theme. The benefit to this is that you don't always have the same interests as your friends in the class, and it encourages a deeper exploration of the topic since the learner is already motivated to learn more about that topic. It may lead to higher quality work due to a genuine interest in the topic. Um, so I really, really love this method because really, if you give me the chance to pick the project or the topic that I want to learn, I'm going to be way more invested into it and want to get a little bit deeper into that. I personally haven't used it, but I do plan on trying to utilize it at some point in my teaching. Allowing the learners to have the autonomy and deciding what they want to focus on I believe will yield a better outcome and a shared excitement within the rest of the group. There definitely are some challenges to this grouping strategy. It may yield an imbalance in group sizing, especially if one topic may be more popular than another. And it may show gaps between the learners if stronger students lean towards more complex topics than others. And the learners may choose a topic also based on what others are choosing, just so that they're not sticking out. And then the second one is, of course, based on student relationships. So the learners will most likely choose peers that they have already worked with or feel comfortable with. This can improve collaboration and communication between these peers as they already have that history with each other. And it may reduce the anxiety that group work can often create while also building confidence with those students. The challenge with this strategy is that you tend to get group thinking or herd thinking. So you do have less diversity of opinion and less critical discussion or challenging each other's opinions. The biggest one to me is that some learners will feel left out or maybe struggle to find a group. Maybe they haven't created those relationships within the classroom, so it really kind of singles them out. And so a group may reluctantly take them in because they feel bad that they don't have a group. And I'm sure we've all been there personally, and it's the worst feeling in the world. And it definitely doesn't motivate you to want to participate. And it can definitely lower your self-esteem, which is not what we're trying to do with our students regarding group work. And then we have random assignment. So this is one that I probably use most often because I haven't put a whole lot of thought into how to group my students together. So this strategy uses methods such as just drawing names from a hat, maybe using an online tool, randomly letting Microsoft Teams put them into breakout rooms, or simply numbering students 1, 2, 3, and whichever number they get is the group that they go to. This does mix up students without really having to give much thought into it. So really good for small projects. I have a couple of projects, that take maybe 10 minutes in the class where they have to work together, and that's kind of an easy way to do it. There's no real meat to the project, so random assignment is okay. Um, so yeah, chances are some people will be grouped with their friends or people that they've worked together, but there's also the chance that students can be grouped together that haven't worked together. And it does remove the pressure from students having to group themselves up, and it will allow for some diverse abilities within each group. A challenge that could arise is that a group may be completely mismatched to the point where communication may be extremely difficult, to the point where group work may just be completely stalled. The learners may have to take more time in building that safe and inclusive environment so that they can build the trust and cohesion within their group. So more conflict could arise from this as well. If this would happen, I would say, kind of try to switch some students around if it was right at the beginning. But as we can see, there's always some kind of issue that could arise from any way that you create your groups. So my experiences, there definitely isn't a single strategy to grouping learners that's the perfect choice for any single activity or project. I've used the same grouping technique for a certain project one year and it worked out great. But then the next year, it seemed that it was a complete flop and I don't know why. So I try not to blame myself for that, but I do remind myself that no two students are the same and no two classes are the same. So what worked for one class may not work for the next, and I just try to adapt that for the next group project. Myself, I don't have any long-term projects or need to have the students in groups for long periods of time. I have maybe three small group work activities in my class. So I do have the ability to switch up my strategy with grouping and see what works and what doesn't. My activities are also usually low risk. There's no large grades. So it makes it a little bit easier and less risky to try different groupings for myself. The students in this program are actually already grouped together from the start, completely at random, as they don't know each other and we don't know them either. So, what we form is we call them base groups within the classroom. This is essentially their seating arrangement, and this is the first time that they're really grouped together. These rows of base groups serve as a sort of a lifeline together or for each other. If one student misses a class or some of the notes, or maybe they can't remember a due date or something along those lines, then they're encouraged to reach out to someone in their base group for some help and assistance. So this really starts to build a community amongst each other and helps them feel like they're not alone while they're starting a new course, technically all alone. So sometimes I use these base groups for small group activities that last, maybe 10 to 15 minutes within the classroom lecture. Sometimes I'm able to switch it up, and instead of using the base groups that run front to back, I use the seating arrangement. Instead, I use it side to side, which is just really an easy way to switch it up. What I would also like to note here, though, is that my classroom is set up in a way that is easy to move around, and students can move their desks and their chairs. So this may not work for you if your classroom is set up a little bit differently. I do run a dental office emergencies simulation in which the learners are put into pairs and they have to collaborate to rectify the emergency scenario that's happening. So for these groups, I do pay a bit more attention in putting the learners together who definitely haven't worked together or that I haven't really seen work together, and that have very diverse abilities. So I try to pair them together so that one person's strength can benefit the other's weakness and vice versa. That way, they're both playing an equal part in the simulation. It is a very no risk, high reward activity. So it really allows the learners to dive in, make those mistakes, and learn from each other. And there's no discouraging of each other's opinions. And then lastly, we do have clinical groups. So when they're hands-on in the clinic, they have groups as well. This is where students get to be hands-on, and they do a lot of partner work, whether it's in the mouth or outside of the mouth. These clinical groups are chosen at random at the beginning, so much like the base groups. But for these, they're actually changed up every 2 months. So with every change, our program coordinator switches the groups up enough so that everyone gets that chance to work on someone else, and it's not always the same group moving forward. So we do encourage the learners to switch up their partners each day, but as you can imagine, they don't always do that. So we do enforce and let them know that, no two mouths are the same. And it would definitely be in their benefit to work on someone different, as they might see something that they haven't seen before. Maybe another student has a congenitally missing tooth, or they have a malformed tooth, or maybe their bite is different than their current partner's. Maybe they have some abnormality in their mouth that they haven't seen before. So much more learning can happen when your partner is switched up. We have developed a little bit of a strategy that prior to the student's evaluation, instead of them picking their own partner to work on, the evaluator will pick them at random instead. So this really should encourage them to work on every partner throughout their practice time before their evaluation, so that they did have that ability to see in everyone's mouth and what was going on and have that opportunity before they're actually evaluated on that skill in that person's mouth. Um, so lastly, I have group tracking. So this is a really neat tracking system that the learners can use to ensure that they have worked on each peer. I definitely can't take credit for this. I watched a recorded presentation from Adrian, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce his last name correct, but Damare. It was really neat. So it's a group tracking sheet that he made up, and he uses it in his classroom to ensure that his learners do switch up who they sit with and who they end up working with for that day. So it really puts the responsibility on the learner, as well as it makes them accountable for switching up their partners. And it serves as a really great reminder. It's something that they can go back to and look at to see if they have actually worked with that person, or if they've worked with the same person for the past 3 days. Tells them that they should probably switch that up. So the one that I made was based off of what I learned from Adrian. So it looks a little bit different. Now, mind you, I haven't put it into practice yet, but I do plan on bringing it up to the other instructors and see if it's something that they think would be worth implementing. So essentially, each student would receive a form just like this one on the slide. For each day that they're in clinic, they're to write down the date, who their partner is for the day, or if they're working on their own, in that case, they can write NA or not applicable, as not all clinical work is partner work. Then they must determine whether they are working with this partner intraorally or in the mouth, or extraorally, so outside of the mouth, or there's days where they do both. Each student should work with every student in their group, both intra and extraorally, in order to reap the benefits of changing up their partners. At the end of the 2 months, when the groups change, they are to disclose whether they worked with every peer in their group, both intra and extraorally. And they also have to disclose that if they didn't, why not? What was their excuse for not working with that person as a partner? So at this point, there really is no consequence to the student if they didn't work with every partner, besides the fact that they might have just been hindering their own growth and their own learning. So that's basically the end of it. I could have gone a little bit more in depth with, creating that how to work in a group, but I also noted the time constraint of it. So that's kind of where I ended it. And I would love to open it up to anyone if you have any questions, or do you want to share a technique that worked for you or something that maybe didn't completely work for you?
Thanks so much, Nicole. Sorry I'm in the clinic right now, so sorry if you hear
That's
some
okay.
voices. Yeah, I work in physio, and I totally agree with you that like you just need like reps with different bodies, and obviously for your case, like different teeth and mouths and bites and everything, and that's super important. So I think that
Yeah.
definitely like our program currently, it's sort of like encouraged, but not really, reinforced in any way. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think I probably need to do something more structured about that. Because people definitely do just sink into the same social groups, and then you're really just not reaping the benefit of like we say like reps, just seeing lots and lots of different bodies and ways of moving and all that.
Yeah.
One thing that I found really interesting in your presentation that I wouldn't have thought of, and I definitely want to try is the high achievers in one group and low achievers in another group. I think like
Yeah.
I would have been like, oh, if these people need more support, give them someone to support. But it's so true. Those like sort of like typical archetypal roles like always form.
They
So I
do.
wouldn't have thought to do that at all. So that was really interesting.
Thanks. Yeah, there's definitely one that stood out mostly to me is that, they kind of get to figure it out amongst themselves because if they're all at the same pace, someone's got to rise. Like they've got to get the project done. So I'm excited to utilize that one day and see what happens.
I took that away as well. I thought the exact same thing. Like I haven't put that much thought into it, and I've always put like, oh, well, this person's a high achiever. Let's have them grouped with this person so that they can bring that person up.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times you just see like that natural leadership take over, where
Yeah.
then they'll just do the almost the whole project themselves.
Yeah.
Um, so no, that's an interesting technique, and that was one of the notes that I had here to try in some of my next training sessions, and just like as I'm teaming people up as well as like a sub foreman uh, throughout my day-to-day job as well.
Yeah. It's funny because I thought, well, the lower achiever gets all the benefit and the high achiever really doesn't get any benefit. And, sometimes I like to place myself in that too, and that's why we get so frustrated. So there's a way to fix it, and I'm excited to try that. So
I think there's
yeah.
also something too, like to being forced to like, because yeah, even with physio school, my experience always before was the same thing. I'd be like, okay, let's just get it done, like just take over in a group. Physio school
Hmm.
was like all type A's trying to interact in a group. So you definitely see a lot of that. And I feel like it did force me to be like, okay, let me like step back. And learning how to, I think, like step back and sort of like let other people shine in your group is a skill into of itself.
It is. I think there's a lot of reflection that can happen with group work, but I think that it also has to be guided. Which I'm learning a lot too, because I think as we get older, we are able to reflect a little bit more on what we do. But our course of students that come in are very young. They're just out of high school. They don't quite have that yet, and they don't have that understanding of why reflection is important and why group work is important. So I think guiding by the facilitators is so much more important than I ever really thought of before. I just thought, just go do your group work. Just you have to work as a team in a dental office, so go work as a team. But yeah, the proper setup is so important.
Absolutely. What's your biggest takeaway from all this research and putting the presentation together? Like or maybe what's something that you're excited to try next?
I'm definitely excited about doing the high achievers and maybe the lower ones. That's one that stuck out for me as well to try to maybe enforce the group tracking and the interest in topic. I thought was a really neat way for students to pick their own groups. Because I just thought, well, you just pick your group. Okay, you're gonna pick with your friends, but focusing it on a topic that they're actually interested in instead of I just giving it to them, I think was really interesting. And I know there's certain ways that you have to kind of go about that too to ensure that not everyone goes to one topic and to ensure maybe all topics are the same complexity. Um, but yeah, I was really, really intrigued by that one, and I'm excited to do that one. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nicole. I'm gonna dip out here and start my first patient at 1, if
Ah,
if that's okay. I'm a tight timeline
absolutely.
today.
Yeah, that was my presentation. So thank you so much for
Perfect.
joining
Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate it.
yeah, thanks for all your feedback.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole.
Great. Thanks. Have a good day. Weekend. Have a good weekend.